Hello, everyone. It's 5 o'clock, so we're going to get started in a second. I'm going to pass straight over to Ty Goddard, who's going to be hosting our discussion this afternoon, which is focusing on digital poverty, the pandemic, lessons learned, and how we can all work together, basically, to try and avoid EdTech being left to waste. Ty, over to you.
Thanks, John. And just to remind everybody, I hope you're all comfortable with us recording this session. We have over 100 people signed up and some people can't actually make it tonight. So if everyone's okay with that, we're recording. And also, we were just having a discussion about Google Meet not blowing up. If people could turn off their cameras and their audio, I think we would appreciate that. Fantastic panel, a real short and sharp discussion this afternoon, this evening, about the digital divide. Looking back, what did various institutions, schools and colleges on the call do about that big challenge during those lockdown moments that we all went through, and also some of the lessons from lockdown. Has it changed practice? Has it changed your institutions? What are the COVID keepers, in the sense that did you try new things and you found them to be productive and you carried on? And also we're going to introduce you to some of our thinking around, and it is indeed the launch of the West Midlands Edtech Hub, a group of schools, colleges and universities committed to helping each other embed education technology across their institutions and indeed across the area. Can we begin to respond regionally as well as nationally to some of the challenges of digital poverty, some of the challenges about infrastructure, speeds? Those were all challenges that we had to meet and rise to during the pandemic. Should we have been better prepared in terms of digital learning as a country? And what next for EdTech across England? I'm going to turn to James. James is from the Rivers Multi-Academy Trust. He's had a bit of a day. Maybe he could tell us about that day in a kind of quick overview of your trust, James. And also, how did you, the key question I'm interested in is, how did you respond to those issues, if you had them, of the digital divide? Welcome.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Ty, and welcome to everyone else who is here as well at the moment. So I'm James Radburn. I am the Computing and Digital Innovation Lead for the Rivers Multi-Academy Trust, and my role's really grown out of the need for something like this, for the idea of growing digitally, how we use technology for teaching and learning. And I think it's almost important is I feel like the man in the middle at some points, between the infrastructure, between actually what's going on, but also about teaching and learning. And I know I've talked to many of the people on this here today and talked about actually how can we make that impact. Now, our schools, we have a range. We have 13 schools with over 4,800 pupils on roll. So you can imagine already what a diverse range that we have. So we have about average about 19% pupil premium, but in some schools that's up to 50%. So actually thinking about our children and really thinking about how big some of our schools are. We have small little village schools, inner city schools, some schools up in Samwell as well. It's not only just thinking about the children, it's thinking about the staff as well. We have a range of experiences and we're very much of we have a very clear intent. So going back to the 3 I's for the Ofsted, but our intent and what our strategy is really good is that it goes down to key principles of wanting to be creative, be efficient, make sure we have good pedagogy, use CPD to raise standards in using technology. So when we looked at lockdown and we looked at, okay, what do we want to do to promote education? I already had snippets of schools using technology really well, using elements like Seesaw that I knew that would work well within schools to support them. Now, I didn't want to respond to something here and now, because as long as COVID has been, we would hope that we get to a stage that we wouldn't always be within that situation. So whatever I put in place was going to be part of the COVID and supporting remote education and how we're going to do it, but also it's going to be something longevity as well. So I found it as a opportunity. There may be a strange way to think of COVID as an opportunity, but it found as opportunity for staff to realise what can we do to actually support our own workload, because that's a really key element, but also how can we push the children and make sure it is focusing on the teaching and learning, because engagement's really important. We had 95%, 96% engagement through remote education. And we knew those children that weren't engaged, there were serious concerns. And it wasn't safeguarding, it was actually parents were ill or they were ill. And so we knew in that situation that we had good outcomes. If you think about the last lockdown between January and March, and I think that's been the most impactful lockdown for us in terms of what we were offering, we had over 300,000 posts within a month from all our children who were engaged in high quality education. Now, I know the DfE released a auditing tool, and you've got to show the impact of what you're doing. So we looked at Seesaw, we paid for Seesaw, we had devices from the DfE, we purchased some devices as well. But actually what we found out was we knew Seesaw was flexible. We knew we would use it in our strategy going forward. We knew we had pockets of schools using it. But actually it could work on any device. So it didn't matter what children used, they did it. And if technology was a barrier to them, well, they did lots of it on paper, and then took photographs of it. So we know every child across our trust had access to a piece of technology. We knew what that technology was, and we knew that the teachers could respond to them and they could hear the teacher voice. They could have video calls where necessary. But for me was the workload level, because whatever you put in place, you've got to, provide something for students, but you had to provide it that was relevant for staff as well. And one of my biggest concerns at the beginning was workload. If we start for going to something that wasn't achievable, is that going to be acceptable? And so we had to raise the standard to some schools. We had to lower the expectations of some parents and work from a base level that we could build on. And that worked really well, because some wanted these whizzy things that actually I knew from an infrastructure point of view we weren't ready for. And so we knew what our middle ground that worked really well. And as those epidemics happened, we pushed forward with that, with Seesaw, with using our tools. And actually, sometimes using simple things and using it really well makes a bigger impact than using lots of different experiences. So that's the biggest thing for us. So yeah, it's a whole range of schools. And as Ty said, we have learned from that. I know we'll talk about lessons learned later, that yes, we were told by one of our IT companies that our infrastructure was good and we had broadband and we were set up for ages. In the middle of a pandemic, I decided let's change our IT company. So I had to present to trustees, buy laptops. I've done so many meetings with trustees and powers that be, asking for money and support and putting things in place for the next 5 to 10 years. We changed IT company. And so part of that at the moment is we're doing broadband changes for something that I know we're going to lease lines, making something ready for the next 5 to 10 years, because we want to be proactive and not just reactive.
Thanks, James. So that explains what you've been doing today then, broadband installation. So I got a real sense there. I'm going to come to Matt. Matt from the Windsor Academy Trust. I got a real sense, Matt, from James of the trust really, James's trust really picked up speed, learned to deal with a number of the challenges. Some of those challenges were indeed workload, whizzy. James talked about not getting too whizzy. I like that, trying to just steady the ship, do simple things really well. And I think that, is going to resonate with a lot of people. What's the kind of picture what was the picture like at Windsor? Were there issues around in your trust around the digital divide? Did you have to buy devices? Did you have to upgrade at speed? Give us a quick picture if you could, Matt, and welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, Ty. I appreciate that, and lots of the things that you said there, James, really resonate. And a brief little bit about Windsor Academy Trust before I start, 'cause I think you wanted a bit of context before we crack on. And my name's Matt Meckin. I'm the Director of Primary for Windsor Academy Trust. We're a multi-academy trust that serves 9 schools, 5 primary schools and 4 secondary schools across the West Midlands, serving Dudley, Walsall and South Staff's local authority. One moral purpose for every child, every student to reach their academic and personal potential, and privilege really to be part of tonight. I think that it's a big question around how do we challenge the digital divide during the pandemic? And I think firstly, just it's been such an incredible response from the sector, and we've learned so much from the sector. We've all had to move so quickly, haven't we? Strategically at times, but also in the moment. I think all of our decisions have been locked into that, getting the best for students in terms of their academic and personal potential, and making decisions based on things being inclusive. Now, we serve some real disadvantaged communities, and making sure with technology, both what we were handing out and what we were purchasing and the Wi-Fi that we were providing was going to the right families in the right way. So in summary, I would sort of, in terms of our provision and our offer, I would sort of put it into 3 categories. Things that we did in the moment to move quite quickly, strategically, but quite quickly. And then something fairly deep and major that we did during the pandemic and what we're thinking about doing in the future. I think like most multi-academy trust organisations and schools, we straight away audited hardware to make sure that we were targeting and then purchasing devices, over 1,000 devices before the DFE devices landed, Wi-Fi in the homes of our most vulnerable families, and safety software as well. So that targeting was really important to us to make sure it was really equitable. I think then secondly, it was that mobilisation for live lessons pretty quickly across primary and secondary. And James is absolutely right about giving staff time during that pandemic to have the right training and time to make this work. So we created a digital hub for staff. We put in place intensive training and created 6 principles for effective remote learning. That helped really structure things, and we made sure the curriculum was adapted really well. In addition to that, we put in place a digital hub for both parents and students, because we felt actually during the pandemic that they needed a port of call as well. Clearly they had the live lessons, but we created a resource online for parents and students to access training and support and videos to support them through live lessons and remote learning, both to help develop their character, but also remote learning as well. And then the second part of what we did was a deeper strategic approach that we planned to do before the pandemic. Now, we were going to pause this, but actually we realised we needed to send it home during the pandemic because it was more important than ever. So we launched iPads for Learning, which was our one-to-one device strategy across our family of schools. And that had a clear vision. And I think that this is important. It's not about creating, we felt, a digital technology strategy, but it's about powering up teacher effectiveness, learner effectiveness, and the curriculum through great use of technology. And that was our vision of that at the outset. And in the last 18 months, we've got 5 year groups that have got one-to-one iPads, year 4 and 5 in primary, and year 7, 8 and 9 in secondary. And further year groups are coming on board in September. We've made sure the schools have had the Wi-Fi capability to deal with that. We've put in place central staffing, a digital tech lead, a lead trainer, and we've found hotspot staff to share and develop that best practice. And I think that none of that would have worked without really focusing on the curriculum. And I think that's an important discussion for us all really as part of this hub, is the adjustments we made to the curriculum during the pandemic were important. And I think the adjustments that we make to the curriculum now using digital technology as a vehicle for that are really important. We particularly looked at making sure we got the right blend around the Samian model, around enhancements versus transformation. And I think the third part, briefly, because I know we've got to get round everybody, is just about the future and what that looks like. What an opportunity we've got. We've got language around recovery and catch up, and it's negative. We've got a huge opportunity to accelerate our young people's progress further and allow them to thrive. And we've made sure that part of our strategy moving forward from January onwards, we've got 5 big moves, and the enabler that's going to go through each of those 5 big moves is digital technology. So we're going to make it a big part of our strategy in the future, both for our young people, but also for our staff as well, who have handled this pandemic tremendously.
Do you think, just as a trust, do you think that you obviously learnt new things, but it was almost like you saw this whole new horizon of digital learning across the trust during this time?
Definitely, Ty. And I think we were starting. We've always had a strong emphasis on digital technology. It grew before the pandemic, and the pandemic only sort of sent it home how important it's going to be. And we're just some of the words and phrases that we're using is, how can we be bold now? How can we be innovative? And I think digital technology is exactly the right place to do that. And
on that 1,000 devices, that the digital divide. I mean, you seem to have moved really at speed there. That was one big commitment at speed there, Matt.
Yeah, it was. And there, we at the time we knew on the horizon there might be something coming through from the DFE, but we made sure in the moment we had backing from our CEO and our trustees, in the same way that James went back to his trustees. It was about giving some compelling evidence that actually we've got to make sure that particularly the most vulnerable students, when we look at some of the research of the impact of the pandemic on SEND, that we had to get these devices into homes and several devices in places, because of course some homes have got 5 or 6 siblings and accessing live lessons at different times. So yeah, quite a significant investment.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt.
No problem.
Kirsty, welcome from Shireland Collegiate Trust. You were digitally rich, and as in terms of ethos, in terms of approach, you'd been thinking about digital for a good few years. I mean, did you experience any of those challenges that James and Matt have been talking about, or was it all plain sailing over there in Smethwick?
Well, actually, we the trust, and good evening, everybody, and it's really nice to have so many people here talking about this really important agenda that was raised. I think was highlighted during the pandemic, and it's really important to make sure that we sustain this agenda, because it was technology that kind of led to, I suppose, being able to save the education for so many during the last 18 months. And it's how we make sure we maintain that. And I'll be really interested to see how we can maintain the momentum that and the strides forward that we made despite perhaps the lack of support over the last decade. And you're right. So Shireland Collegiate Academy Trust is the founding school. Shireland Collegiate Academy is in Smethwick in the West Midlands, just southwest out of Birmingham. And as you said, has had a reputation for using, a good reputation for using technology for well over a decade, maybe 15, 20 years, and very much set by the vision and the consistency of that vision over the time. But we're slightly bigger now, not too far away from Matt and Windsor Trust as well. So we've got 5 primaries now. We've got 3 secondaries. One of the primaries is Shireland Technology Primary School. It was a free school that was set up and opened a couple of years ago. We've got 2 more technology primary schools in the pipeline, one of which will hopefully open within the next year, and 2 more secondaries, including one with the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, so one very much focused on music school, but very much based in the West Midlands area. But in terms of the barriers that you talked about, very much hearing the same thing across our schools. I think one of the things that we found is that certainly I noticed that the debate very much centres around devices. And I think already both James and Matt have alluded to that actually the success of remote learning, the schools that seem to do it well, not just in the Shireland Collegiate Academy Trust, but other places as well, where we looked at really identifying, you know, the technology architecture that underpinned things like internet access at home, but also the other part of that triangle is the content, you know, the what was going to be taught, and part of that is, you know, through the curriculum aspect, but also the pedagogy. And James, you mentioned about the pedagogy, and as Matt said, it's got to be underpinned by training, because certainly from the school that I run on an operational basis, as well as overseeing the other primary schools, is that the teachers that you find to come and join you, it's very much about the teaching and the pedagogy. And we often say we can give them, as long as they've got an open mind in terms of how they use technology, we can do that and train you. So even within our own organisation, although we were able to, you know, within 24 hours turn things around and get onto remote learning really quickly, because we had a lot of the systems, the architecture in place, the content in place through our curriculum, which was online both for primary and secondary. It still was very much about making sure that everybody came with us in terms of the staff, and making sure that the training was really supported everybody, because at the end of the day, it was about making the remote learning successful, was that every teacher was able to deliver at least to some sort of line of quality. And I think we were able to do that within our schools. But it was hard. It wasn't easy.
No, exactly. I mean, did you have challenges as well in terms of access, you know, the digital divide that we've been talking
about?
Well,
I think from a primary perspective, we decided that very quickly, well, right from the beginning, that we wouldn't do live lessons and that we would do recorded lessons. Mm. And I think it worked for primary, because often, I think, as has been said, we have families that will have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 upwards siblings in a family. And often those that get, there's a pecking order. So those in secondary will tend to get access to the devices that they do have in homes first. And so live lessons for secondary pupils were kind of the ones that seemed to be a priority that the families gave to. So then the primary children were kind of left by the way. So we said, as long as within the 24 hours or within the 12-hour period that the children could access it when the secondary siblings weren't on, then that was fine. And that worked really well, because what that enabled us to do, we've got a whole library now of these fantastic videos that were curated by our teachers, and it was their own content, video content, you know, with activities and tasks for them to do, that we are now using back in class and recycling this year in terms of independent learning activities for certain children in the class. So we were able to capitalise on that. Fantastic, thank you.
Zaytoon, welcome. You're the EdTech lead in the ATC Multi-Academy Trust. Could you give us the same kind of picture? I mean, it's a kind of sense of almost looking back to look forward, I guess, in some ways. Just give us a picture of what it was like, what were some of the challenges, and obviously some of the joys that you went through. And welcome.
Thank you, Ty. Hi, everybody. I'm actually not quite West Midlands. I'm more northwest. But there was in terms of the amount of students who couldn't actually afford a device at home or have any kind of Wi-Fi at home. We had quite a number of those. Just like Kirsty, way before our pandemic hit. We had already started to move towards Chromebooks, and we were one-to-one with Chromebook devices across the school. We had quite a small pocket of students who, obviously because of the fact they couldn't afford a Chromebook, they didn't own a device, but they were hiring or loaning a device from within school. So when it came to the pandemic, we were quite quick to move to remote learning, being able to provide them with the Chromebooks that they needed and the infrastructure that they needed at home as well. So if they needed the Wi-Fi, we were quick to give them dongles and whatever else we could find that would help them through that. In terms of our training as well for our staff and our students, a lot of our staff had already been trained on the use of, we're a Google reference school, so the use of the Google tools and how it can be used in a classroom. But when the pandemic hit, a lot of the things that we had learned to do over so many years just came to a little bit of a halt, because all of a sudden we had to learn this new way of teaching. And it wasn't just, oh, take out your Chromebooks, we're just going to research this, or we're going to do this. It was more to do with the entire lesson needs to be now structured online. So our teachers really became quite innovative in that time. We went from just simple online lessons. We taught every single one of our lessons on timetables online. We had a very good attendance level. We had various structures in place to make sure that students were online for their lessons. So there was quick text messages home if they were absent, and so on, and a quick message to mum and dad, and they were online within like 5 minutes. So it worked. And the training that was provided to our staff, I created what I called a CPD dashboard, and it hosted a lot of our training on there. So it hosted how do you videos for myself, showing them how to use these tools and how they can use it within their teaching, and how students could access some of these tools as well. But on top of that, we started doing podcasting. So if we were using a tool that was working or using a concept that would work, we would actually talk about it, and we would release these podcasts. And the more the staff started to listen to each other, it brought our CPD. It made it flourish. So a lot of the things that we were doing, we were quite quick to share with each other. It reduced the workload immensely, because had one person created a Google site on something, we would just share it across, duplicate it, and edit it with all our own stuff. So in terms of that first lockdown, as soon as the news started breaking that we were going into lockdown, we did crash courses on how to use Google Meet and all the basic stuff, just to get staff used to that concept. And quite quickly we were into this virtual learning. Now, as time's gone on now, and post-pandemic per se, we've continued to take on board the CPD dashboard. We've continued to add all of our training sessions on there. So our staff now don't need to sit in a hall for 2 hours on a Wednesday afternoon having CPD delivered to them. It's all done online in their own time. And a lot of we've created a student dashboard on the back of that. So a lot of the training that we need to give to the students, a lot of the information we need to provide students, it's all there. There's a Google form that's attached to it, just to make sure that they are doing it, and any feedback they want to give us. And we've got a parental dashboard as well, which again hosts a lot of the training that they would require. In terms of deprivation of digital tools in our area, our parents were buying into a buy-in scheme with the Chromebooks. So we had it reduced down to something like £3, £4 a month, and we subsidised the majority of that price. Now we've rolled that out throughout the trust now. So we've got 2 primary schools and 2 secondary schools. And we're in the same situation now. 2 of my primary schools are in Blackpool, and I have to say one of them still don't have the full infrastructure that they need, and that isn't something that's coming from the trust. It's something that's coming that should have been there way back from Blackpool's councils. But if you just imagine your Wi-Fi at home being at 350 megabytes as being one of the premium infrastructure, this particular primary school gets 1/8 of that coming into the entire school. And for them to now take on board some of the stuff that we're doing and carry on working the way we're doing it, it's just difficult. So we're working on their curriculum with them, embedding the use of these digital tools within the curriculum. It's not just an ad hoc thing that they're going to use in the classroom. It's why are we using these, and how are they enhancing our teaching and learning, and what are the benefits of those tools. So we're at that position now where the digital strategy is really starting to take shape across the mat, and the schools are responding really well to it, and students are responding really well to it as well.
So it changed you. It changed you as a body of staff. It in terms of your CPD, your CPD delivery, your dashboard. I mean, are you a much more collegiate team now? Are you you approach things differently now?
Absolutely. We have staff who are willing to talk about techniques they're using, any new initiative that we're using, and actually have a conversation on a podcast that's then aired out. Whereas previously we wouldn't have the opportunity to have those conversations, or they would have been a bit reluctant to have those conversations, but they're very open. We always say we created independent learners from this. And we have also created independent staff who are now willing to go online themselves, learn how to use a tool, learn how to update some of the stuff that they need to update in their curriculum in order for it to work virtually if we have to go into a lockdown again. I'm a science teacher, I'm a physics teacher. We've rewrote all of our curriculum so that it was virtual ready. And we did that during the pandemic. So if we do need to go down that route, we can just say, right, here you go, this is what we're going to be using for that. So yeah, it has changed us immensely.
That's great. That's great perspectives. Thank you. And I thought before we go to the RGS family of schools, we should get a perspective from FE. Amy, you and I worked together during the pandemic on the EdTech demonstrator. I've come to recognise your shelves, as you've probably come to recognise mine as well. But this perspective, what FE has done, and I want a massive shout out for FE during this call, because not only is it Love Our Colleges Week, but also I think you've played a most amazing role, not just your own college, the Heart of Worcestershire College, but also FE generally, in terms of supporting, mentoring schools. It's been perhaps in some ways that you were slightly further ahead than lots of schools. You were experimenting with digital in lots of different ways. What was it like for you and your team? You're the director of blended and online, and you also clearly play a very big role in the Blended Learning Consortium as well, which I think is a fantastic innovation. It's about 12 questions there for you, Amy, but you're used to that.
My memory means I'll probably only remember one of those, but I'll try. But I'd just like to also say that I think that praise is rightly deserved for the FE sector, because I mean, lots of these challenges that colleagues have already discussed on the panel certainly ring true with the challenges that we felt. And I suppose really we've all had to be really responsive and do as much as we possibly can in our own environments. From an FE perspective, the kind of additional challenge that we have is that lots of our subject areas are very vocational, really, really practical. So all of a sudden you've got a bunch of construction students who are used to doing bricklaying, for example, day in, day out. And then all of a sudden they're locked down at home. And how do you then kind of try and mirror that type of lesson in a kind of remote environment? I mean, we're really lucky in the sense that at Heart of Worcestershire College, we've been doing blended learning now. We incepted the Blended Learning Consortium back in 2014, which is made up of 154 FE colleges that all came together and pulled together to then create and develop digital online learning resources to then disseminate back out to each other. So we've already got that really lovely collaborative approach where we very much support one another, and we've got the resources there. But we've been doing blended learning at How now since 2011. So it's very much embedded in the curriculum. And like Kirsty and Matt mentioned, the curriculum is so important that digital isn't just a bolt on, it threads right the way through. So all of our learners since 2011 have been doing 1 hour for level 2 learners or 2 hours for level 3 learners a week of blended learning, and that's independent online learning. So we had that infrastructure in place. Our executive management team are really forward thinking when it comes to digital, and I think it's really important that message comes from the top, because then all of the staff are very much brought along in the journey. So they invested heavily in digital before all of this had happened. The infrastructure was in place. We scaled up that blended learning model. And one of the nicest things that I think worked really well was that the EMT were very much like giving the staff that kind of freedom to say, right, you guys go and be as creative as you possibly can. So we were having hospitality lecturers doing live cook-alongs from their own kitchen through Teams, and we were having the games design students doing kind of remote control powered car races around another lecturer's kitchen. And you know, there were some fantastic stories, but it brought everybody together more than separated people, which is something that I don't think you would have expected. And a couple of things that I think are the best things to come out of what was a really traumatic period for so many people was that, as I said, we've got the blended learning kind of thing there. So the learnings that we've had is about staff well-being and how we can use technology to enhance and kind of support staff. So now we've introduced an agile working policy, which means that staff have got that freedom again to teach when they need to, but also have that time at home if they need to. And that has gone down incredibly well. And I would say also that when it comes to curriculum planning, we've realised that with the pandemic, so many jobs were lost, weren't they? And so many sectors have changed and vocations have gone in very different directions. What we're doing now is our blended learning model has changed now from being very, very focused on vocational technical skill development to skill development as a whole, kind of to develop 21st century skills like problem solving, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, so that our learners now can go out and they can be adaptive, you know, they can adapt to different environments and they can go into different sectors because they've got transferable skills rather than just honing in on that vocational skill. And that is going all the way through our blended learning model now. So it's we think that we're trying to take the best out of a gloomy situation and, like everybody said, really harness those learnings and capture them and build on them for the better, really. It'd be a shame to lose it all.
I agree with you. And as an institution, do you feel that it honed, obviously from what you're saying, it honed some of the strengths that were already there? It really tested you during this time of tragedy.
Yeah, it did test us, absolutely, because we were just doing a fraction of what then had to be scaled up to, you know, a daily thing for a very long period of time. So that did test us. But again, you know, the things like getting devices out to learners, we've got 7,500 learners over 4 different campuses and around kind of 800 members of staff. So that's a lot of people then all of a sudden spread out.
Yeah.
And you found that our IT teams were just literally jumping in a minibus with a load of reconditioned laptops and just doing like laptop drops around students' houses. And
Brilliant.
And it's that kind of thing that, you know, you can have every manual under the sun from, you know, all the guidance from the DFE and what have you. But when it comes to the crux of it, it's just humanity, isn't it? And it's people helping people. And that's what we found with our teams, that people just kind of pulled the sleeves up and cracked on and did whatever they had to do, really, to get learners supported.
And those teams, or for all of us, and this is a continual theme of conversations I'm having over the previous months, is that, you know, those back office teams, none of this could have been successful without them. Incredible. And
they're the unsung heroes, really, because they're the ones that have kept us all kind of propped up and able to do what we do. So I think, you know, from our college, and I've seen it from many other colleges, the finance teams have all of a sudden had to change everything because paperwork just didn't exist anymore. And, you know, it's just amazing how quickly people adapted. And I think if you'd have posed this scenario to people, they would have said that would take 10 years to implement if you had to write a strategy and all of that. But actually, you know, you can make it happen, can't you, if you have to?
Yeah. And that cycle of change has been a theme in all of our conversations, I think, tonight, and how cultures, Zaytoun was talking about it. You use those insights about those Blackpool schools as well in your trust. That cultural change happened so fast because it had to, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. They had no other way, and if they didn't step up at that moment in time, those children would not have received any kind of education. It's really difficult. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, John, Matt, how do you want to handle the insights from your families of schools? Matt, you're head of computing. John, director of innovation. You and I have spoken lots, John, about where you want to go as a family of schools. Some of the practical work that you've done during the lockdown times. How do you two reflect on where you were then, where you are now? Are you in a position to reflect? Is it a bit too early in some ways? I don't know. How are you feeling there? How's the Worcester team? You got to put your microphone on too.
Oh, John, come on.
It's bound to happen. I thought it would be me.
So close to the conversation. No, it's literally been inspirational to hear all your stories, and what sprung out to me is the similarities, despite the different contexts of our school, the challenges that were faced by all these different institutions, primary, secondary, further education, sound really familiar. We were lucky that we had a pre-existing digital culture, which meant we knew that I'll talk about the secondary school. I'll let Matt talk about the Grangers, one of our prep schools. But we knew that every single pupil here had a device, so we didn't have those concerns of getting devices to pupils. We had concerns about Wi-Fi and access, etc., but we knew we could kind of after we had that 3-week warning. Once that 3-week warning was up, we second guessed schools would be shut. So we put the right procedures in place to go straight to remote learning and to do it live. It could be classed as a gamble, but it worked. On the first day of lockdown, the entire curriculum went online, clubs went online, and pupils tuned in. We at the end of it all, we reflected by doing some research. We got some data on it, and Ty, I know I showed that data with you, which was sent up to Whitehall. Yep. And over 90% of parents, pupils, and teachers all agreed that progress had been made. So that culture, that word culture, is really important and really significant to us because of that digital culture that we had. But that's not to say that everything was perfect. The time of lessons needed to be adjusted. The length of the school day needed to be adjusted. And there was all these arguments that popped up at the time. It's all sort of flooding back to me now about whether we should be on Google Meet, whether we should be on Zoom. It didn't matter. It was the content that was important. It was how that content that was delivered, and whether it was on whatever digital platform you chose to use, making sure that you adjusted how you taught and what you taught to fit that different setup was important. Engagement with children online is difficult, and gauging engagement is difficult as well. So we looked at how we can make those lessons exciting and interesting and useful, if you like, for pupils as well. The whole well-being side of things was a massive thing as well, not just for pupils but for staff as well. So we made sure we had ongoing CPD for staff, but also parental discussions as well. In fact, one of the long-term outcomes of COVID has been this sort of discussion we're having now. We wouldn't have ever thought about doing this 3 years ago, but we're doing this on a regular basis, and we're broadcasting our RTC events. Just last week we did one on digital parenting, and parents tuned in across all 4 of the family of schools. So it's really, really interesting to see all these things unfold. But what we also noticed, and this is probably where there's a bigger crossover, is that whilst we were doing this, other schools weren't able to, simply because that culture didn't exist. And rather than sit around slapping ourselves on the back thinking how wonderful we are, we thought actually what we need to do is help. And we tried our best to assist schools in the locality and further afield as well by offering the CPD session to them as well. We gave devices where we could to some local primary schools. But what my concern is that those, not the devices necessarily that we've given out, but devices are now ended up in schools and now what? You haven't got the infrastructure, you haven't got the CPD in place, you haven't got that culture in place. Are they going to get shoved back in a cupboard to gather dust? And that's what I think we need to discuss as a EdTech hub and make plans to avoid happening, because we've got an opportunity.
Yeah.
For example, we've got a little school just over the road called Our Lady Queen of Peace. They're in that boat. They've got their own iPads, but no one told them how to set them up, and no one told them how to do the professional development for them. So we are now working with them, first of all, with the technical side of things. And then Matt and I are putting forward a little plan about how we can get them going with those devices and grabbing that opportunity where we can. So despite the fact we're an independent school, we understand that this is a significant moment, and we want to make sure that we do our best to make sure it goes in the right direction.
And you know that research, I remember it because it was you as an institution reaching out to the consumers, both young people and parents, and asking them about the values and how valuable digital learning was. I mean, that was a very important thing to do, wasn't it? Yeah,
it was. There was a surprising lack of data, we thought, about what the impact had been from a digital perspective.
Yeah.
So we ascertained as much as we could what the difference the digital culture had made to learning, to progress, to well-being, to teacher training, all these sorts of things. And we got that data to inform ourselves more than anything else. But I remember having that conversation with you on Brighton Beach. And you just said, I want to see this data. And we got the data over to you, and it was fascinating. And we got more data, some secondary data at the end of the second lockdown as well, to compare it all, because we didn't know how long this was going to go on for. So we used that data to adjust what we did to make it better, because we can constantly improve.
It's very much Matt. Matt was saying that that this is an opportunity to kind of change the record. We often heard, and you may remember it, how many hours of lost learning has been incurred. What is going to be the lifelong economic effect for young people? And I think, John, you and I were trying to make the case that actually, in lots and lots of examples, and I would argue in all of your trusts and your institutions, that young people had also thrived in terms of being online. They'd also learnt in different ways. They'd also been challenged in different ways, but there were some gains. And I think that was particularly resonant in your research. I'm really glad that you've done it. You followed that up, John.
No, not at all. I think you're right. And it's interesting to think about how many different ways this affected children. And there are positive things as well. There's certain children that actually perhaps progressed better during lockdown. And that's not to say anyone enjoyed it, but there were certain variables that meant that they were able to concentrate on their studies perhaps more than they would do otherwise. And I'm sure that's something that's echoed across all the people and schools that are in this conversation. Matt, did you notice that at the Grange?
Matt, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Ty. I'll tell you, it's been inspiring. I think just us all in a room tonight and just talking about, there seems to be a bit of a trend, in terms of sort of digital strategy, forward thinking, forward planning, getting tech in the hands of pupils at sort of the earliest convenience, which is going to actually have impact. I could talk to you all night about sort of what I felt was a bit of a success story in terms of implementing meaningful tech, but we haven't got all night. The one thing I do want to really focus on here is it was pretty much the night before we went into lockdown. I was actually quite excited, Ty, and I was excited for sort of the one reason that I knew that our staff team was stepping out of their comfort zone, and they were going to go in a place where they'd never been before. I don't think ever will we have a chance to replicate the need for absolutely incredible staff training, support to actually use tech in a meaningful way. It's never been there. Can we now use that as a momentum, to sort of change things? Sort of leading up to that, we had a massive belief in digital leaders, in young leaders in the school. They'd often become, at the age of 9 and 10, Apple teachers. Before teachers we'd have then 9 and 10-year-old Apple teachers teaching teachers to become Apple teachers. And that's exactly what John's alluding to. It's about culture, and it's about trying to sort of, I think, ensure when we use tech that it actually has impact. there's so many times I walk into lessons and we'll have a chat. Was that the right thing to use? Did you need to use technology there or not? Did it actually improve, or was it substitution? So I think where we're at now, Ty, is this huge level of reflection.
Yeah.
In terms of what we're doing, what we're implementing, and why. It's always sticking to the why. So I think moving forward, it's so good that as John sort of said, I'm not sure this would have happened had lockdown not happened. It's hanging on to those positives. The fact we're all in this room supporting each other. How can we now use this as a vehicle of change to support these other schools? And I think the independent schools have always had a bit of a bad name, but actually I think we get huge, enormous pleasure from using what we've learned over the last 7-8 years of the digital learning program and supporting schools to actually, not make the same mistakes as we have. And actually, at the end of the day, we're all doing the same thing. We're trying to educate children.
That's a very powerful phrase, though, that you use, which was meaningful tech. Do you see meaningless tech?
Yeah, I think we all do, Ty. I reflect again back on when we started this journey. We'd all as teachers be a bit app happy. We chuck devices in schools and we expect it to suddenly, produce, magic. Well, it's not. It's about how it's used, isn't it? It's about why you're using it. Matt spoke earlier about the SAMR model, substituting, or are we actually trying to do things we couldn't do before? And that's what's exciting. That's what's moving learning forward. Virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence. This is kind of where things are going. And I think it's about, taking your staff teams with you, working with schools and making sure that when we do use it, it's for the right reasons. It's not just dumping a load of laptops into schools. And it's nice and refreshing to hear that, you're all on that same pathway in terms of really, really educating the use of tech.
Did it change you as a professional then, Matt, as well, do you think?
Yeah, it probably made me sort of step back a little bit. You can't control everything. I was going into the same sort of predicament as the teachers. I was right out in the sticks in Alfric, running off 1.4 megabyte broadband, having to sort of, run extension cables out to a phone for tethering a 4G connection. So my 2 kids could go live lessons and myself. My wife taught PE, so she was doing live lessons in PE. So we were really challenged. But when you're challenged, that's when you find a way, isn't it? That's when you know why you're doing it.
So your house was this, yeah? Like lots of people's houses and flats. It was just, yeah.
It was a fun place to be.
At least you weren't on Amy's bricklaying course, yeah, having to sort of do virtual bricklaying. I still want to know what that looked like, Amy.
Listen, you won't be seeing any wonky walls in Worcester anytime soon. Let me tell you.
No wonky walls in Worcester.
They did a great job.
Listen, I'm looking at the time and thinking, in our last, because we are going to be utterly prompt, is what do you want to create out of this hub, this sense of solidarity that I think lots of us have felt that we went through. There's the mutual aid that we've all been involved with, and helping. John talked about a school just down the road there. From you, we've all been involved in mentoring. Zaytoon, you've been here in the Midlands, up in Blackpool, other places. Everybody seems to have that core theme to their work. What would you like the hub to achieve? And is that going to be a key component of developing EdTech across education, do you think? John, do you want to kick us off a bit?
Yeah, no worries. My microphone switched on this time, so I've made progress since the last time I spoke. I think for me, it's the establishment of a long-term partnership. It's not just a webinar that we all tune in today and then say goodbyes and that's it. It's establishing what we all do well, sharing what we do well with the other people in the group. I'm desperate already to come and look at Amy's school, Kirsty's school, Matt's school, Zaytoon's school, if I can pop up to the northwest as well. I know James is just down the road from us as well. And what I'd also love to do is invite everyone else to come to our school and see what we do. And once we start that sort of more informal relationship and see what the cultures are at their respective places and actually get some context on what we're talking about, I really think we could probably start working out how we can help specific schools, because we'll know what we do well. And if I meet a school down the road that's in desperate need of a certain skill that we can't help with, then I'll know where to point them. I want to get more people involved in the hub as well. I want more people to join, not just schools that have necessarily got a prowess, but schools that want help, and schools from different sorts of backgrounds as well. Not, we've got a wide variety already, but there's other types of schools that perhaps we haven't got within our hub yet, and certainly widening the hub, gathering that expertise and sharing best practice as much as possible are things I'd like to see take place.
That's fantastic. Both Matt and James are using meaningful tech. There we are, folks. Matt.
Yeah, brief one for me, just to reiterate some of the things that John said there. But I'm finding it hard to get the visions of Matt Warren's pandemic household out of my head at the moment. But it sounds amazing. But I think just to reiterate some of the things that John has said there, I see 3 ways that this can head. And I'm really keen around vulnerable student and families. And I think there's something we can do around lobbying and influencing, and particularly when you look at a recent study that Cambridge University did, only 50% of households earning between 6,000 and 10,000, which there are a lot of, across the West Midlands, haven't got home internet access. We know that 7 pupils out of the pandemic, have really suffered. So what can we do to support vulnerable pupils, and how can the hub help influence that along the way? I think John's absolutely right. What can we do to share, to see from one another, to deepen the work that we've discussed this evening, which has been hugely motivating and inspiring? And then thirdly, supporting others at the right time. And I think they're 3 really powerful things to take forward. Hugely enjoyable. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Matt. I've scribed those down for later on. James, over to you.
Yeah, just to reiterate a few things. I think actually as a leader, it's a privilege to step back and go and see other classes. I think that's the first thing you learn, is actually go and see what is possible in other settings. And so conversation I've had with Amy previously is we have internally across our 13 sites an online website. So we show best practice on there. How do you do this? A guide, but also what is possible. And I know a lot of us talked about pedagogy. I know Matt said about Samar, Kirsty says about, sorry, I must be really late because the light's just gone off now, about pedagogy as well. But what we're looking at is actually the walkthroughs, because we all come into teaching with a good, strong pedagogy. What are we doing? How do we use cognitive science to think about breaking things down into small steps? Or how do we use teacher explanations? Now, technology can really enhance that and actually put it for meaningful reasons. So some of the work I've already started, and I think it'd be really good to actually open up, would be how does pedagogy link with technology, and sharing that element of it and seeing it from different settings. Because I know it can be done on any device. Like none of us have really sold, well, you have to use this app or use that. What we've done, we've all gone back to the core principles. So it's seeing what is possible and sharing that as well.
And also all of us have talked about the architecture. And I think that's come across really, really strongly. Zaytoon.
Yeah, I just want to add in a little bit on the accessibility. What we found was a lot of our students who have accessibility needs in the classroom, the use of some of those technology tools, it's enabled us to allow them to be more independent with the use of these tools, and not having to have their TA right next to them in order for them to read something or translate something. And just to reiterate what James just said then as well about pedagogy, I'm in the middle of doing a coaching program with my schools, and it's about digital tools in the classroom and what are their biggest fears and what are their biggest challenges in the classroom, and how can we overcome some of those. And quite a lot of it is just stepping out of their norm, and what Matthew said as well, that just taking those staff out and putting them into an area where they're not used to, and see how they can innovate and take things further and take those ideas further.
And a big thanks from Carol, who's listening, for that mention about accessibility. Absolutely fundamental, Carol, Zaytoon. Kirsty, and then Amy, if you want some final words. Kirsty, over to you. Yeah,
it was just to build on what we were just talking about in terms of pedagogy. We did a lot of work with teachers and staff about trying to unpick that a little bit as to how does pedagogy online, how does it differ to in the classroom? Because it does, particularly around modelling. So what's the same? What's different? What can technology do to bring, as we talked about, that makes modelling and that explanation better, more accessible, but also what's more difficult as well. So we did a lot of work of unpicking that, and that's something that I think perhaps teachers very early on in this journey thought that online teach live lessons exactly as they would in the classroom, and it isn't. It's a completely different beast. So it's how do you modify, what do we take the best bits from both?
And I think we're all aware that, you know, digital doesn't really appear very much in teacher training, and I think that is going to have to be changed as well. Amy, I'm thinking particularly about, you know, where you began with the Blended Learning Consortium. And I think it's, you know, when I hear John speaking, the optimism, your journey has been bumpy. You probably started with a BLC, with, I can't remember, but 7 odd schools and loads of people saying to you, 7 odd colleges, and loads of people saying to you, it just won't work. And now you're thriving.
Yeah, I think that these things start off small, don't they? And then it's just having the belief that what you're doing is the right thing. And I think that what we're doing, we all believe in, you know, EdTech is so important to get embedded properly into schools and colleges and other institutions. But I think from my perspective, I'd like to see how we then have a vision for the future and sustainability, and also maybe a bit of guidance on protecting learners, because we talk about lots of apps and things. Lots of people use all the free apps and don't realise where all the student data and things like that are going. And I think that that's where teacher training needs to be informed, other colleagues need to be informed. So that kind of, this group should really help as a body for kind of guidance. If we've got any of that expertise that we can share and really help people with, I think that would be great.
Great point. And John, final word from you.
Yeah, just a quick one on that teacher training aspect. And this is the Worcester University, just down the road from us, are about to join the hub on that very topic. In fact, we've got a relationship with them that's starting in after Christmas, where we actually are bringing their prospective PGC students to RGS for a couple for seminars about digital learning, remote learning, etc., etc. So those teachers will get that direct experience of what we've been through. And again, I'd like to open it up to anyone else who wants to come along to those and again start that whole sort of teacher training aspect of the hub. Fantastic.
Matt, do you want to cut the final words and then we'll close, or are you okay?
That's a huge amount of pressure, Ty, on me. What I would like to say, guys, again, is it's an absolute privilege. We can all sort of, remotely join each other. And Ty, thank you for giving up your time this evening, being, such
all of you
role model in this area. It's lovely to have you sort of, spearheading, launching, propelling us, forward. Because I think we've all got great aspirations that we can achieve some great things together. We're a little bit stronger, aren't we, learning from each other?
Absolutely. And that's the message that's coming in the comments, by the way, which are big thanks for the sharing of the good practice, the inspiration, and for me, just the visionary. It's how you all can be such visionaries, but also entirely practical. And I think it's that duality that we have to hold on to. And thank you so much. Really appreciate all of your time, your insights, and as I said, all the thanks in the comments are entirely worthwhile. Thanks for giving up your time, and also thanks to RGS Worcester for hosting, and the energy that I'm seeing is just fills me full of optimism. Let's carry on. Let's build the hub. Let's build the most digitally rich place in the universe in the West Midlands. I think that's a great ambition. You've started, so let's carry on. Thank you so much.